1. Asylum Whispers. I never believed in ghosts until I spent the night in the old asylum. My friends dared me, saying I wouldn't last an hour. The place was abandoned, and the air was thick with decay. As I wandered the halls, I heard whispers, soft at first, then louder, as if the walls were alive. I felt a cold breath on my neck and turned, but no one was there. Panic set in, and I ran towards the exit, only to find it locked. The whispers grew into screams, and I covered my ears, desperate to drown them out. Just when I thought I'd lose my mind, a figure in a white gown appeared before me. She reached out, and I saw the face of my mother. "You promised you'd visit," she whispered, but my mother had been dead for 10 years. 2. Midnight Movie. I always loved late-night movies. The old theater downtown played classics every Friday at midnight. That night, the theater was unusually empty. Just me and a handful of others scattered throughout. Halfway through the film, I noticed the people around me weren't moving, not even breathing. I looked closer and realized they were mannequins, eerily lifelike. I bolted for the exit, but the door was locked. The screen flickered, and a message appeared. "Welcome to your nightmare." The lights went out, and I felt a hand on my shoulder. When I turned around, the mannequin beside me had my face. 3. Wedding Crasher. I didn't know the bride or groom, but I love crashing weddings for the free food and drinks. This one was in a grand old mansion. As I mingled, I noticed everyone seemed tense, whispering behind their hands. I brushed it off and headed to the dance floor. The bride and groom were nowhere to be seen. Curious, I asked a guest, who looked at me with wide eyes. "They disappeared during the first dance," he said. Suddenly, the lights dimmed, and the bride's voice echoed through the hall. "I know what you did." I felt a chill and turned to leave, but found the doors bolted shut. Then the groom appeared, holding a knife. "You shouldn't have come back," he whispered. I realized I was at my own wedding, and I had been the one who disappeared. 4. The Bar's Secret. I was new in town and decided to check out the local bar. It was cozy, with dim lighting and friendly patrons. I struck up a conversation with the bartender, who told me stories about the town's history. One story stood out: a tale of a man who disappeared after being last seen at this very bar. As the night went on, I noticed everyone was staring at me. The bartender leaned in and whispered, "You're him, aren't you?" Confused, I tried to leave, but the patrons blocked my way. "You can't escape again," they chanted. I looked in the mirror behind the bar and saw a face I didn't recognize. It was the missing man, and it was me. 5. Bakery of Doom. I loved the smell of fresh bread, so I visited the local bakery every morning. The baker, a friendly old man, always greeted me with a smile. One day, I noticed a new employee, a young woman with sad eyes. She never spoke and seemed afraid of something. I asked the baker about her, and he just shrugged, avoiding my gaze. The next morning, she was gone. When I inquired, the baker said she left town. That night, I had a nightmare of being trapped in an oven. The heat was unbearable, and I screamed for help. I woke up drenched in sweat and decided to skip the bakery. Weeks later, I read about a missing person found dead in a bakery oven. Her picture was in the paper. It was the young woman. The article mentioned a suspect, a friendly old baker. 6. Office Shadows. I was the last one at the office, finishing up some paperwork. The building was eerily quiet, the hum of the air conditioner the only sound. I saw shadows moving out of the corner of my eye but brushed it off as exhaustion. As I packed my things, I heard a whisper, "Don't leave." My heart raced, and I spun around, but no one was there. The lights flickered, and the whispering grew louder. I ran to the elevator, but it wouldn't come. I took the stairs, hearing footsteps behind me all the way down. When I reached the lobby, the security guard looked at me, puzzled. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, but as I left, I saw my reflection in the glass door. There was a shadow behind me, smiling. 7. Dentist's waiting room. I dreaded dentist appointments, but it was time for a checkup. The waiting room was cold and sterile, with a faint smell of antiseptic. I was the only patient there, flipping through old magazines. The receptionist called my name, and I went in. The dentist was a kind woman who made small talk as she worked. Suddenly, she paused and looked at me with concern. "Have you been having nightmares?" she asked. I was taken aback. "Yes, actually," I admitted. She nodded, as if expecting my answer. After the appointment, I left, feeling uneasy. That night, I had the worst nightmare yet. The dentist was standing over me with a scalpel, whispering, "Time to wake up." I jolted awake and saw her standing at the foot of my bed. 8. Library's secret. The old library was my favorite place to unwind. It was quiet and smelled of aged paper. I often stayed late, reading in a secluded corner. One evening, I found a hidden door behind a shelf. Curiosity got the better of me, and I ventured inside. The room was filled with ancient books and strange artifacts. As I browsed, I heard footsteps approaching. Panicking, I hid behind a curtain. Through a crack, I saw the librarian, who I thought had left hours ago. He was talking to someone in the shadows, mentioning a ritual and a sacrifice. My blood ran cold. When they left, I sneaked out and ran home. The next day, the library was closed, and a sign read, "Under new management." Later, I found an old newspaper article about a missing person found in that very library. The picture showed the previous librarian, who looked exactly like me. 9. Hotel Room 13. I travel a lot for work and usually stay in budget hotels. This time, I ended up in a quaint old hotel with a lot of character. The receptionist handed me the key to room 13, warning me about its history of strange occurrences. I laughed it off and settled in. The room was small but cozy. As I unpacked, I noticed a diary on the nightstand. Curiosity piqued. I opened it and read about the previous guests' experiences. They described hearing whispers, seeing shadows, and feeling a cold presence. I shrugged it off as fiction until I heard a soft knock on the door. I opened it to find an empty hallway. Throughout the night, the knocks continued, louder each time. By morning, I was exhausted and ready to leave. As I checked out, the receptionist handed me a new diary. "For the next guest," she said with a smile. The cover had my name on it. 10. Haunted Fairground. The abandoned fairground was a childhood memory I cherished, so when I saw it was reopening for one night, I couldn't resist visiting. The rides were old and rusty, but nostalgia made them magical. I wandered through the empty stalls, reliving old memories. I decided to ride the Ferris wheel, despite its creaky appearance. As I reached the top, the wheel stopped, and I had a perfect view of the entire fairground. Suddenly, I saw shadows moving in the distance, heading towards me. The air grew cold, and whispers filled my ears. Panic set in as the shadows grew closer, and the wheel started to move again, slowly. When I reached the ground, the fairground was deserted. I ran to the exit, but found it locked. Turning around, I saw the shadows were people, and they were all looking at me. One stepped forward and whispered, "Welcome back." I realized they were my childhood friends who had disappeared here years ago. and I had never left.